Bill Cleary.
So Bill worked at Apple in the early days, what, the first like 4 years of the company?
81, 85.
81, 85. And then during the first internet boom, spun out and created his own interactive agency called CKS Partners, which stood for Cleary, Kwame, who was now at Sequoia Capital, and
Tom Suter.
Tom Suter, who was
one of the greatest designers that ever lived.
Greatest designers that ever lived. And at CKS Partners, they were, interestingly, represented and were the agency of record for both Apple and Next Computer.
Well, we did Apple. It was, in fact, we almost got fired one time because it was a conflict, and a VP from the marketing department at Apple said, I'm going to have to let you guys go because you're doing Next. At that time, coincidentally, John Scully walked by and he said, hey guys, how you doing? I want to give you more work. He gave us 4 buildings and guaranteed $4 million in new business and threatened us to fire the VP of marketing. So it was kind of fun.
That would have been a good thing. Now, how many of you have read the biography of Steve Jobs out there? It's amazing. We think that there are more people. Well, both Bill and I've known Steve Jobs since I think I was 17, because my brother was in the homebrew computer club.
You used to go to his garage.
Yeah, I didn't quite go to his garage, but I went to the coffee shop where they used to meet and play Pong, and they were all sitting around saying, oh, everybody's going to want one of these. And I'm like, dudes, I don't know, that's pretty boring. But boy, was I wrong. But anyway, so we have a lot.
Did you buy a blue box?
No, I would have, which is a great story where he and Woz's first commercial product was to imitate.
To basically imitate the sound of long distance, to make long distance calls, and they could do it for free. So Woz used to call it probably different folks he knew.
Yeah, for free.
For free.
So anyway, so we both read the book and thought it was okay.
Walter Isaacson is a great book, but again, it's it's like Apple is like the story of the the 9 blind guys and the elephant. It depends where you touch it to get that particular part of the story. And I'm going to just focus on marketing because I thought marketing to me was the most interesting part of Apple, and that's what I did. But other guys worked in technology, and other guys worked in different areas.
And you have a degree in anthropology.
I have several, and that's why Apple hired me. They didn't have any anthropologists on staff, and they said, we need one of those. So that was good. It was ironic that they hired me.
So I think I've done a good enough job introducing you. So I'm going to leave, but take it away, Bill Cleary.
Okay, one question. Where's my this device?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. So anyway, as Tony mentioned, my story started in 1981 at Apple Computer, and worked in sales promotion, worked for the Apple II division, worked for a crazy maniac of a guy by the name of Fred Hayden. Gave me all kinds of jobs, all kinds of freedom. It was actually really interesting because I came from New York, where I was an anthropologist working for a big ad agency. So this was my first trip to California, and well, not my first trip to California, but my first time actually working in California. I haven't left, so obviously I've been enjoying myself. But we worked not only for Apple. After I left Apple in '85, I actually headed up marketing for the Apple II division, which if you read Walter Isaacson's book was not the greatest job. We were doing all the revenue and taking all the abuse, but it was kind of fun. But we then went on to do more Apple with CKS, a company I founded in 1987, and we picked up Next and Pixar, and that's where the story begins, and that's where Steve comes back in. I think the most interesting aspect of the story is that we look and we talk about, in Isaacson's book, he talks about how Apple revolutionized the computer industry, but he also revolutionized the cellular industry, smartphones, music industry, motion picture industry, and we forget to mention, of course, introducing retail stores was absolutely amazing, one of the most amazing marketing things he ever achieved. But we forget that Apple actually provided us with these incredible tools to do marketing. So Apple's tools helped us do better marketing because we could integrate all the marketing. Everything was digital now. We could develop ads, packaging, even video editing using Avids back in our day on the same basic computer platform. So this was the amazing breakthrough, because what this translated into is the idea of integrated marketing communications. When I was back in New York, Young and Rubicon, a big agency in New York, used to call it the whole egg. That you build brand by integrating messaging. But nobody ever did it because you'd hire 10 different agencies with 10 different worldviews and all these different creative teams. and nobody ever got it. So you'd have all these things conflicting with each other, all these messages conflicting. We used to call it brand Bosnia. Then you get into Steve Jobs and you say, okay, he launched the Apple II Macintosh to define the personal computer industry. The iPod changed the music industry. The iTunes Store revolutionized the distribution of music, completely changed it forever in the way you buy it, as Tony mentioned earlier. And the Apple Store changed retail. Pixar changed the motion picture industry. The Apple iPhone revolutionized the smartphone. The Apple iPad continues to shape the way we read, listen to, and how we learn and process information. My kids' class at college back east, everybody's got an iPad, and that's how they read books. Apple and Jobs did one other thing that we forget. They fundamentally changed advertising forever and marketing. And it started with a well-crafted story by a guy by the name, how many of you have ever heard of Regis McKenna? A PR guy in Silicon Valley, really famous guy, a brilliant man. And he said, hey, I'm going to tell a story here, well-crafted story, about these two young guys, the two Steves in a garage, and how they built the world's first personal computer. And even though other guys were working on personal computers, Apple just said, hey, let's just get in front of the parade and tell everybody we're leading it. In the early days, that's what they did. It was a brilliant idea. In the early 80s, they hired some of the most talented marketing people I ever came in contact with. Not just the marketing folks, but the graphic designers, the ad guys. They had Shy Day, they had a guy by the name of Lee Clow, by far one of the best ad men I've ever met in my life. Creative beyond belief. He had all these guys around him. The first, perhaps, only Silicon Valley to fully integrate all of its marketing communications. And to this day, I don't see it happening. People are using social media, they're using this and that, but it's all a patchwork. And that's why they have difficulty, I think, in seeding their brands and building this incredible emotional attachment with the customer. They also made great products look even greater. They built the #1 global brand in terms of market capitalization. They're right up there as well. So, what happened? So we know the story about how Steve left Apple, went on to start Next. He did Next Step and created this wonderful Unix-based environment, lip service, all these cool things he did at Next. But it wasn't a commercial blockbuster by any stretch of the imagination. He always kind of longed to come back to Apple. He also did Pixar. Started out with a certain solid percentage of that company. Eventually, he owned the whole company. And he revolutionized the way movies were, animated films were actually made. He comes back to Apple, there's not much going on, so he launches this very colorful eye candy. And he starts right out with a great ad campaign called Think Different. Why this campaign is great is because how many folks would come along and differentiate, position themselves against every other competitor out there by saying the smartest, most creative, most talented people on the planet would probably, if they were still alive, be using Macintosh products or Apple products. How many guys have the sheer chutzpah to do that? Nobody else would ever even have thought of that. So he starts taking these very affable dead people, resurrecting them, so to speak, and then putting them in his ads. And not only that, but he integrated it across the board. You saw them all over the city, whatever city you lived in New York, Chicago, London, Paris. You saw them on billboards, on backstops. And we knew back then that Apple was going to be real successful. That one there is Charlie Manson, by the way, because kids started mocking up Apple ads. And this is the highest form of compliment. This is what we call, we talk about social networking. We had all these kids out there doing all kinds of creative and clever things, you know, sort of emulating Apple's advertising, but sort of in a parody way. Parody is wonderful. To this day, you still see people doing parody of Apple advertising, whether it be The Simpsons or Saturday Night Live. It's pretty amazing. But that's when you got it. When you have that kind of emotional attachment that builds that kind of brand loyalty, you're really a formidable, you really are a formidable brand. So the other thing that Apple was big on is brand personality. I heard some people kicking around the idea of personality today. But if you look at the guy on the right, because we actually did some test work on this in '83 and '84, we found that the average person, when they anthropomorphize, that's a word I learned in anthropology, in archaeology class. When you anthropomorphize, people give certain human traits to companies. It's called brand personality. And what we have here is the guy on the right clearly is the hipper of the two guys. He's clearly a West Coast guy. His hair's a little bit long and kind of shaggy. The guy on the left is right off of Madison Avenue. The guy's a complete loser. He's got that long appendage hanging down from the past, that thing we call a necktie. He's still wearing that stupid thing. He's got a really unhip looking bag, and he's wearing a Brooks Brothers suit. It's probably made to order. You know, not very hip. The guy on the right, that's the guy we want to emulate.